Okay, we can hear you. If you have some presentation, you can start it already. We definitely don't have really introduced Professor Homza, who's the leader of the Department of Slovakian History on the Comenius University in Bratislava. He's specialized in Slovak history, on regional history. He wrote several books concerning interesting medieval sources, and of course he wrote a famous monograph devoted to the holy women of transition to Christianity, Mulieres Suadentes. So, Professor Homza, the floor is yours.
Thank you. But before I will start, I just would like to express my gratitude to organizers, and I would like to know you that I would be really very happy to join all sessions with you in Prague privately, but this is bad luck. We should do it in this way, okay? St. Ludmila literary topos or historical figure. There are only a few other figures in the history of Central Europe whose importance has been interpreted in so many conflicting ways as that of St. Ludmila. Even contemporary Czech historiography approaches the image of St. Ludmila elaborated by her hagiographers in an ambiguous and contradictory way. The obscure issue of this historical figure was firstly thematized at the beginning of the 12th century by the first Bohemian chronicle, Cosmas, in his Chronica Bohemorum. In the 18th century, the great scholar of the Bohemian Enlightenment, Joseph Dobrovsky, facing the impossible task to explain the ambivalence of Saint Ludmila's image in a rational way, dismissed it by saying that all relevant sources were just later forgeries. It was this statement that placed St. Ludmila and her historical role in 10th century Bohemia at the margin of Czech critical history for the whole 19th century. Only at the beginning of the 20th century, another Czech historian, Josef Pekař, dared to challenge this opinion, defending the historical role of St. Ludmila and the validity of the sources concerning her person. Some authorities, such Pekař and Václav Chalupecký, together with their disciples, initiated a new chapter in Czech historiography, which, contrary to Dobrovsky's opinion, considered Ludmila to be one of the first genuine historical persons in Bohemia and accepted the information included in her official lives as the first valid historical facts in Czech history. However, not all scholars were satisfied with Pekař and Chalupecký's explanation of the role St. Ludmila played at the beginning of the dynasty of Přemysly. The most significant among those who criticized Pekař was, according to me, Záviš Kalandra. Invoking the authority of Dobrovsky, besides strongly criticizing the source material, this scholar offered a new way of understanding the sources on Ludmila in contrast to the already more or less accepted results of Pekař's school. He looked for hidden meanings in the sources, demonstrating that the ambiguity of the figure of Ludmila lies in the fact that it is a later Christian transformation of an earlier pagan cult to the old Slavic goddess of fertility, Teta. In addition, he considered the historical figure of St. Ludmila to be a crux historicum for any historian. So it is valid for me as well. In spite of the fact that it is not possible to agree with all of Kalandra's opinions, which were completely rejected by most later scholars, it cannot be denied that he was at least partially right, while it is now clear that some of the information contained in the sources on Ludmila are dubious and can be interpreted in many different ways. Kalandra is right when he states that the quasi-historical question of the causality of the historical event in this wait a moment, in the sources should be replaced by the question on the reasons to include such information in a written document. This method, similar to today's hagiographical approach, can be useful for this research as well. Nevertheless, my view is not as radical as Calandra's, neither completely rejecting Ludmila historicity, nor denying the historical validity of the sources on her person. Therefore, this paper aims at reaching some balance between both of these positions of Czech historiography. On the one hand, assuming partial reliability of the sources that Pekař and Chalupecký did, and Calandra's desire to demonstrate the literary validity of the legends of the Ludmila on the other. In other words, this work focuses on examining basic images of Saint Ludmila present in her sources up to the end of the 13th century. It is more literary approach can help overcome the difficulty of telling ficta facta from facta qui vere sunt. Supposing that the different aspects of Ludmila's image might have been transferred from different sources, I will try to define the evolution of her image and establish a new morphology database for her hagiographical figure. At this point, the main objective is to define the type of image of Saint Ludmila in its own historical development as well as in broader European context. The overall hagiographical type of Saint Ludmila is composed on two basic levels, the older and the younger ones. The older ones consist of a few motifs that can be found in the older layer of sources on Saint Ludmila. They can be constructed as well as the specified changes they underwent from the formation of Saint Ludmila's cult up to the creation of the homily Factum Est. The younger one consists of the motifs included in this homily. Is there any shift of meaning between fuit and factum est? Also, there must have been some development. Its specific features are hard to determine due to the fragmentary character of fuit. Therefore, we must strictly use as an initial point those sherds that the oldest records of Saint Ludmila, which preserve the oldest form from Saint Ludmila holiness, namely the fuit legend, where her holiness resembles the one of Job in the Old Testament. Apart from the early records about Saint Helena, this type of holiness can be found in Gregory of Tours' work, in Rus in the image of Saint Ludmila, and in the British Isles in the image of Saint Margaret of Scotland. What is more interesting, it was used on the epitaph of another saintly woman, Croatian Queen Jelena, already in the 10th century. However, a very similar type of religions represents also accidentally German Queen Matilda. The model of the figure of Job from the Old Testament as an archetype of Christian saint is significant in the whole Christian Europe as a hagiographic stereotype. Just in terms of perception of this archetype, a significant shift between fuit, legenda, Christiani, and factum est can be observed. In fuit, Ludmila can be labeled according to the importance of the original Old Testament Job as a woman of holy reputation, Dei famula, a servant of the Lord, and as a representative of typical Old Testament and thereby of Christian virtues as well, a good mother, a refuge of the poor, a comforter of the wretches. In the legenda, Christiani, Ludmila is already portrayed as a saint, accomplished in all her deeds. In factum est, however, in this is the essence of the matter as a mirror and example of holiness and the first patrons of believers in the Czech lands. This evolution had its roots in the way her death was interpreted. Gradually, she started to be recognized as a martyr of the Christian faith, as reflected in the Factum Est. At the very baseline of her cult, however, it is more appropriate to label her, together with her grandson Wenceslaus and other European saints of various dynasties, with the term strastotierpec, torment sufferer. Further, the image of good Ludmila as a martyr of the Christian faith, is subjected to its opposition with her malicious daughter-in-law Drahomira. To emphasize this image, the anonymous author of Legenda Christiani compared Drahomira to Jezebel from the Old Testament, labeling her as the second Eve. There is no need to explain who was persecuted and killed in this case, linking Drahomira to Eve. Eve gave birth to Cain and Abel, Drahomira to Boleslaus and Wenceslaus, implies Ludmila as the second Eve, the Virgin Mary, and this is the conception of Ludmila as holiness that, in my opinion, was fully developed in Factum Est. At the same time, an allusion between Drahomira and Eve has no place there. Factum Est also labels Drahomira as driven by Jezebel's spirit. Czech hagiography matches the cult of Saint Ludmila with the image of education. Saint Ludmila is often portrayed with the Bible in her right hand in Myslbek's famous sculptural group in Wenceslav Square in Prague, for instance. To be able to understand the origin of this motif and plausible analogies within a wider European context, it is necessary to focus first on the Legenda Christiani, according to which Boleslaus and Wenceslaus were entrusted to the care of their grandmother Ludmila. However, the text only mentions that the children were entrusted to her to be educated, educandos commisserunt. So it is still not possible to draw a direct conclusion that she herself was educated as well. Her calling for improvement in the Christian virtues as vivid in Fuit and the first Czech Slavonic life of St. Wenceslaus also portrays her in this form. A similar image of her can be also traced in the later lives of St. Wenceslaus, Oriente iam sole and ut annuncientur. In the masterpiece in question, the homily Factum Est, however, the educational function of Saint Ludmila is closely connected with her function of guardian of Christianity in the country. Also, it is right to assume that Saint Ludmila was a literata, thus uneducated. Her wisdom, similar to that of the other saints, for instance, St. Francis, resulted from understanding the meaning of the Annunciation as such, as well as from an enforcement of education for her family. In a way, it can be seen as a reflection of the topos custodia anime, which was also used in the hagiography of other European female monarchs. Scholarly wisdom and education were attributed generally used as a part of the image of the Abbess of St. George, as symbolized by the Holy Scripture. However, Saint Margaret of Scotland and Saxonian saints Matilda and Adelaida in particular were also portrayed with books, and there were many well-known images of the Virgin Mary holding a book. However, it may be also a late Roman or Byzantine inspiration. Moreover, it is a well-known fact that Saint Margaret of Scotland impressed her surroundings with her education, which she acquired in the Kingdom of Hungary. And that it was again the education that Adelaida from Hungarian Polish Chronicle, as well as Saint Matilda, the patrons of Ottonians, boasted with, etc. For the further development of the image of Saint Ludmila, it is of key importance to interlink it with the fate of the Bohemian Church, as it can be learned indirectly by interpreting the dream of young Saint Wenceslaus in his first Saint Wenceslaus legend, Crescent Fide, the destruction of the house of priest Paul, which symbolized the Czech Church. Here the death of grandmother Ludmila and the expulsion of the priest from the country. The same motive appears also in Gumpold's and all other St. Wenceslaus legends that excerpt from him, including the so-called Christian, which finds its most complex expression in Factum Est. In this source material, St. Ludmila is directly identified as the patrons of the Czech Church and clergy. This way, however, the homily concludes one of the direction in which the cult of Saint Ludmila develops, understanding the native saints as an imitation of the Virgin Mary, imitatio Mariae. At this point, it is even possible to formulate a preliminary hypothesis that factum est uses some similarities between Mary and Ludmila as the main method to sacralize the other. It is an essential leitmotif throughout the homily itself. Focusing directly on the text, the composition itself interestingly consists of 12 parts, which can be interpreted according to the Marian sacramentality. For the purpose of this paper, the 12 parts of the homily have been given different headings expressing the embryons, the main idea of each of them. First part, proving that Ludmila is holy and virtuous, almost immaculate, because she trusts unshakably in the gospel she has known. Second part, Ludmila as blessed Jael, Benedicta Jael. The third part, Ludmila as the widow, Judith Vidua. Fourth part, Ludmila associated to the morning star, Stella Matutina. Parts 5 to 7, the story of Ludmila. Eighth part, Ludmila as Esther, Sicut Esther. In parallel between Esther living in a palace and Ludmila coming into heaven. Ninth part, reasons why the date of her murder, 16th of September, should be commemorated in Bohemia. Tenth part, reproaches towards the nuns of the convent of St. George in Prague for hiding the body of St. Ludmila and falling short at spreading her cult. 11th part, reason why the body of St. Ludmila deserves special care by the nuns of the mentioned convent. 12th part, for the development of the motive of Esther, parallel between Ludmila and Christ on the one hand and Esther and Asfer on the other. This section could also be named after the miraculous vengeance which affected the martyrs of St. Ludmila after her death or after her first miracles. As it apparent, the factum est is based on two significantly different styles, the epic and the lyric. The epic or narrative still dominates in parts 5 to 7, which are essentially based on the story of St. Ludmila, as described in the Legenda Christiani. It is only logical that these parts lack any metaphorical designation of Ludmila. The lyrical section consists of parts 1 to 4 and 8 to 12. Half of them develop parallels between women characters from the Old Testament, Jael, Judith, Esther, and Ludmila. The rest deals with the different motifs, settled poetic images, metaphors, and references to the Holy Scripture. Now I would not go into details describing all these Jael, Judith, Esther analogies, what we have spread in European female hagiography, and just focus on a very essential part which was made as a parallel between Ludmila herself and the Virgin Mary, because as I told you, it is the basic method of sacralization, of strategy of sacralization of Saint Ludmila in factum est. Looking at this hypothesis in more detail, the names in the text that refer to Saint Ludmila show that the most important attribute the author uses for Saint Ludmila is that of mother, 8 times. Of this number, a mother of believers, Mater Fidelium, it is found 4 times, the rest being Mater Prote Oraturam Deo, a mother who prays for you, Mater Inclita, a glorious mother, Mater Cleri, a mother of the clergy, and simply Bona Mater, a good mother. 3 times Saint Ludmila is referred to as a patrons of which twice as a patrons of Czechs, patrona Bohemorum, once as the first patrons of those faithful to Christ in Bohemia, prima patrona fidelium Christi in terra Bohemiae. 3 times she is referred to as a propagator and supporter of Christianity, propagatrix fide Christiane, fautrix fide Christiane, and 3 times as a mediator, interceder in heaven, interventrix in cielo. Twice she is called a widow, vera vidua, true widow, Judith vidua, Judith the widow. The following metaphorical titles are assigned to Saint Ludmila only once, namely a comfortress, solatium, a powerful advocate, magna advocata, a source of endless joy and happiness, in gentis laetitiae et gaudii occasio, a refuge for the poor, refugium pauperum, comfortress of the poor, consolatrix miserorum, a mirror and the example of holiness, speculum and example sanctitatis, etc. The holy body of Ludmila is described as a consolation for you, a refuge for sinners, a celebration of your dwelling. One does not need to be a theologian to recognize the importance of these addressing titles typical for the veneration of the Virgin Mary, the Mother of God. Saint Ludmila in thus compared to the Virgin Mary, the Mother of God of the Czechs. In other words, according to the author of the homily, Saint Ludmila should fulfill in the specific Czech environment the functions that are generally reserved for the Mother of God. She is the mother, patrons, and here it should be stressed that not only the patrons of the Czechs, but also the patrons of the Czech clergy and the church, and finally, an interceder. However, Imitatio Mariae is not an exception in female monarchy hagiography. Comparison to the Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, imitating her was a quite common practice among the Christian emperors, at least after Byzantine Empress Pulcheria, who is said to have come to identify herself in some extent with Theotokos, the Mother of God. Over a period of time, however, the imitation of the Virgin Mary among the Byzantine empresses began to acquire similar meanings as that of the Byzantine emperors and their role as deputies of Christ on earth. A little bit less exemplary is the imitation of the Virgin Mary in the oldest phase of Merovingian female hagiography, Saint Radegund, as well in the cases of Anglo-Saxon saints or the saints of Ottonian period. No wonder that in the 10th century Croatian Queen Jelena wished to be buried in the temple dedicated to the Virgin Mary, which she had built. St. Matilda as well is buried in the Chapel of Blessed Virgin in Quedlinburg. The Imitatio Mariae also played a significant role in shaping the saintly reputation of Princess Olga in Kiev, as can be seen from the primary chronicle, which, among other hagiographical topoi, contains a rephrasing of all mentioned New Testament verse. Rather unique is the homily factum es, the rate on quality of this image, which recalls the earlier attributes of female saints of Central European royal courtiers in the 13th century. Therefore, the massive use of Imitatio Mariae and its multi-layered character of constructing Ludmila sainthood also refers to the time and circumstances under which the homily in question originated. There is only one possible explanation. The saintly princes of Central European ruling dynasties of this period needed to develop their own model of sainthood. As suggested above, the practice of using references to a strong figure of a dynasty in order to refer to the holiness of its female dynastic line was very common in the hagiographic procedure. What better example could have been for an abbess of St. George at the twilight of the 13th century than St. Ludmila, who was associated with the Old Testament women such as Jezebel, Judith, Esther, and through them to the female model of all models in the New Testament, the Virgin Mary. For it was precisely her who, accepting Christianity, brought salvation to the community she represented, namely the Czechs. In this sense, the body of St. Ludmila placed in Basilica of St. George, just a few meters from the very center of power of the premises, was a true and precious treasure, which was to be taken care of thoroughly and whose glory was to be spread. And this was precisely what the author of the homily wished. So, thank you for your attention. It was like from the automatic gun, but hopefully it was understandable.
Thank you very much, Professor Homza. It was truly inspiring study concerning the, let's say, the ambivalence of the picture of figures we have to deal with. On one hand, we had the topoi of the literary figures. Obviously, the women's figures are usually connected with the figure of Virgin Mary or other. We saw that there's plenty of models that could play in this way. And of course, on the other hand, there's the historical nature between or behind all the stories. So thank you very much. And I believe we could start the discussion. Do we have some questions online or here inside Carolinum? So now we have here Professor Petr Kubín on the microphone, so I hope everything will work properly so he can ask the question.
Hello, Martin. Thank you very much for your very interesting contribution. And my question is very simple. Which person, according to you, was the most important figure, most important model for our Ludmila?
So my answer is now very complicated. It depends of which layer we are speaking about. If we speak about this older layer, the most important person was Saint Job from Old Testament. And if we are speaking about this, let's say, later layer, of course, there is this imitation of the Virgin Mary as the basic stone on which it was built, her image. And of course, this prefiguration of Judith, Esther, Jael, which are considered to be prefiguration of the Virgin Mary as well.
So I can recommend the thanks of Professor Kubín, and we can ask if we have other question. Grzegorz Patz.
Yes, I just want to mention one problem, because Professor Homza has mentioned this shift which happened, according to him, between Fuit in Provincia Bohemorum and Legenda Christiani. Namely, that in Fuit, Ludmila was not presented fully as a saint, rather as a Deo Devota Famula and so on. You also yourself, Professor Dr. Izny, you have mentioned that yesterday, and this is the opinion which is also to be found in some texts of Professor Kubín. And in fact, if one look to the text of Fuit in Provincia Bohemorum, I mean, when I look to this text, I see something different. I mean, Ludmila is called here Beata Ludmila. So, of course, Beata is here the synonym for Sancta. This is true that the word Sancta is not to be found there, but Beata is obviously a synonym. You know, the Virgin Mary is usually called Beata Maria in these sources. There is also, we have also information about the miracle around her burial in what was later the Basilica of St. Michael. And then she's also called martyr, and her death is called martyrium. So one can pose the question if one can be a martyr without being a saint. I think not. So generally speaking, I would like to say that according to me, there is no reason to say that in Fuitum Provincia Bohemorum, Ludmila is not fully showed as a saint. She is a saint in the full sense of the word. Thank you.
According to my opinion, the answer is not actually mine. The answer, it comes from the wording of Cosmas of Bohemia. He refers about the doubts which were still alive even during his life. Concerning the sainthood of Saint Ludmila. So I agree with you, Professor Pat, that there are beautiful features of sainthood which are already in the first legend of Saint Ludmila, but still we have here historical evidences, and we should follow them.
Okay, thank you. If I may interject in the debate, I would remind also the first, or one of the first texts concerning St. Wenceslas, the first Old Slavonic text of St. Wenceslas legend also describes Wenceslas as a kind of candidate for sanctity, not exactly a saint. That's a really interesting figure that maybe reminds us that Fuitum Provincia Bohemorum is actually very close to the original figure of Ludmila and her life. But as Professor Homza rightly pointed out, there were certain doubts that were referred by Cosmas.